It took England a while to sort itself out, but eventually Pastor Steve Gillespie. So that we made up a council, Pastor Peter Visser in Holland, you know. And the council, by the way, is very diverse. And sometimes people worry a little bit about that, but I always say that if you ever get a group of people together, you have hawks, you have doves, and you have moderates, and you will always have that. And that can change on another subject. The hawks and the doves and the moderates can change, you know. But that's good. It's open debate. It's different. So I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, so we've talked about the split, and you've described obviously the doctrinal issue that caused the split, and you've also started to describe the formation of a council. You realise that how it had worked previously under Pastor Lloyd had certainly worked to a point, but then was no longer working, was no longer appropriate, or had sort of fallen out of balance. But I'm sure that the pastors collectively that had formed Revival Fellowship saw it as an opportunity to review and look at us as a church collectively and where we were going and our purpose. Is that true, or can you shed any light on that, or what was the thinking at that time?
Well, I would say the thinking at that time was a little naive, because we were almost trying something new. And I think for the last 12 years, I'll be quite honest, I think the council has battled a little bit, and particularly to relate to the people. And it has almost become like a police force in itself. And even though we might say it's not, that is the perception, and it's sometimes hard to get another perception over. So there is, I think we're still, you might say, learning, and we have survived for 12 years. And generally, a lot of the pastors are very happy for just say, look, you guys, you're the council, you sort out those things. And others maybe feel a little bit, you know, that they ought to have more input and that sort of thing. So I still feel that, you know, in our fellowship, we are still, even though it's 12 years, I still think to a certain extent we're feeling our way. I dare say all we can say to people is we really are doing the very best that we can do. The one thing that we really want to do, big time, is, and we're thinking about the future of our fellowship, so we want to bring more people on, particularly younger people. Like the council is ageing. You know, we're all going to start dribbling soon. You know, we've got to bring.
Hopefully not too soon.
Not right at this moment, hopefully. But you know, we really are looking to have another whole generation come in. And these days, we are inviting a lot of other pastors, some of them younger, to the council meetings, you know, with the view that, you know, very shortly, some of them, we're going to step aside. You know, Pastor John has just turned 70 and Pastor Bob is 68 and so I'm 65, you know, so it'd be great to have a younger looking group, but I dare say they need training, they need to have the school of hard knocks, so so I just sort of, as far as our fellowship goes, you know, I just really still feel it's unique. It's got a wonderful message. I dare say I'm very biased towards the Revival Fellowship, that out of all the revival movements, we have tried to keep the original vision and not to go off on tangents, whether it be demonology or whether it be this doctrine. You know, we've tried to avoid all that, try to keep a balance. I think that'd be my biggest word. I'm always trying to keep a balance, because Pentecost is famous for extremes. You know, it's always going off a tangent, you know.
A little while ago in the interview, you mentioned how post-split, I think this is what you're talking about, you perceived that the church had gone out of balance in some areas. So it had, like, we'd over-adjusted in some ways.
Very much so. I think we had become very hard line, you know, and sort of lacking in mercy, lacking in forgiveness, lacking in understanding, lacking in counselling people. It was very black and white and unfeeling. You can use all those words, you know, and I'm not saying at this moment that we've got it right. I don't think we have. I think we've still got, you know, a certain distance to go, you know. But I will say that we do discuss it a lot, and when anybody puts in any input, you know, sometimes people might think, oh, they didn't listen to what I said. Often we do, we just don't agree, you know, but we do listen as much as we can. And I think we're just really trying to get the balance between, just like a parent does with children, between discipline and loving and forgiveness, and if you lean too far one way, we feel a little bit that some of the Pentecostal world is lent too far, and things like immorality and drinking, a lot of drinking now in Pentecost. It's quite open. People drink alcohol, they didn't used to. So to me, that we feel they're letting that slip a little bit, But then I look at some parts of our movement, of the general revival movement, where they've become very insular, very, closed door, stopping people even visiting relatives. I hope and pray that our fellowship never does that, We don't rub shoulders with a lot of Pentecost, not because we don't want to, by the way, never for that reason, but because we do feel that there is compromise there, and there is a weakening of things, and we just don't want to hold their hands at the moment, And I know that's sad, but right now I sort of feel we've got a unique message. I mentioned this afternoon, in our missions, it's booming, So what we're preaching and what we believe, they say to us, Pastor Godfrey Whippen constantly says in our council meetings, brethren, please don't change anything. Please don't weaken anything. It's working for us. We need this balance to control a big revival, So, but to say that we're stagnant in our belief in that, I don't think we are. We're fairly cautious, which can be irritating.
Conservative by nature?
Conservative is most probably it. Not everybody, but some of the oldies ones like us are, Pastor John, I dare say. And there's... Now and again, there's a few rumours go around, and I hear people say, oh, he says this, and a lot of it is rumour, and generally the big thing, and always everybody says it, is communication. And now and again, there's, he said, and if you get together, it solves so many things when you get together and talk,
We're coming to the end of 2007, and all of us are waiting for the Lord's return. We don't know when that will be, and I guess my question to you is, what do you see the future of our church is for however long we have? Particularly in the Western countries, the church, Revival Fellowship as we know it, its origins are based here in Australia. And again, for those that are going to get an opportunity to watch the DVD or read your book in the next few months, they'll get a much bigger, broader picture, because you're also a bit of a historian, Pastor Jock, and have painted that picture for us. But for our church now, and looking at your experience and all the things that you've gone through over the last nearly half a century of experience, what do you see, or where do you see our church going and happening to it?
The whole fellowship varies tremendously from country to country, and within Australia it varies. So if we were talking about Papua New Guinea, well, there's not another thing you can do there. It's just booming. And Africa is booming, and we're just trying to keep up with it. So as you talk about the whole fellowship, and even in Holland, we've got a great revival going there. They opened up a new centre only a couple of years ago in Rotterdam. They're opening up a new centre, like we used to do here in Australia. But here in Australia, we are struggling a little bit. There's no doubt about it. And like everybody, I'm like everybody else, I'm trying to think, what is the answer? Many other groups have got big numbers, but I suppose I'm hesitant on changing the gospel just to get the big numbers, because I think in the long run, if you lose the gospel, you lose the truth, and the numbers don't, it's a waste of time. So I want to have revival, but I would love to have it, sticking to the Word of God. I would just love to see us, and this is just Jock Duncan talking, not even the council or anybody, this is Jock Duncan talking. I would like to see us become a lot more proactive with evangelism. And what I mean by that is just putting on lots more sort of things that you can draw people to, and Bible prophecy. I'd love to see a resurgence of Bible prophecy in our fellowship. It used to be a big part of our fellowship. It's died away. I'd love to see it come back, because it really is interesting to our brethren, and it really puts everything in perspective. We, like many people, foolishly worked out that the Lord was going to come back by the year 2000, and for some reason God didn't listen to us. So really in the end, nothing's changed. All the setup is still there. We believe all the signs are still there, but maybe we're a lot more cautious, and we just say, look, we don't know. Like the Bible said we would, we won't know, but he said we would know the time. So we're still convinced that we're living in the last time, and we're just going to try and as much as we can, use every opportunity to spread it. I think sometimes in a local assembly, you can become just focused on that assembly. And the trouble is that if that local assembly starts to go through a bit of a hard time, you maybe think that that's how it is everywhere. But it's not. You know, it often is a local assembly. And I can only encourage our people, all of them, you know, now and again to make contact elsewhere. If you can go to Papua New Guinea. Have you been to Papua New Guinea?
I have.
I knew. Many of our people have. And it's an awesome experience. It opens up your ideas, you know, and you suddenly realise, hey, things are still good. Things are still happening. Okay, we've got a few problems. But assemblies can go through a few problems and still can come out as long as, you know, people get their focus back on it, have belief in what they've got and what God's called them to, and just keep inviting people to come along. You know, it was great today. We had 7 new people here today. If you have things like 7 new people in your meeting, you know, well, you know, sooner or later you're going to start ticking them off. You know.
Absolutely. Final question for you, Pastor Jock.
Yes.
47 years ago, you received the Holy Spirit. Is that right?
That's correct.
37 years ago, you became a pastor.
Correct.
12 years ago, you were part of this council that we've already talked about. So you've been integral member of the international leadership of our church.
Yes.
So it's nearly 50 years of heavy involvement. You've seen everything, as we've heard this afternoon. What keeps you going? Why are you still here? Why do I still see a grin on your face?
You wouldn't see it on my face all the time. And I have varied, particularly in the last few years, of sort of, you know, wanting to know where I fit in and what I do. And you do, by my age, you get to know your own personality fairly well. And I don't fit in as a sort of leader of an assembly. I did it for 15 years in Christchurch, and I did it, but it wasn't really comfortable. I really love roaming. I must have some gypsy blood in me. Pastor John in Adelaide finds it hard to tie me down. And, you know, he wanted me to be involved in... Adelaide's got 4 centres, and would you be involved in this? And I've hesitated, and in the end I'm not. And it leaves me free. So I'd love to be... number one, I like to tie the whole fellowship together. But also, if I could be in any way instrumental, particularly in Australia, revving it up again and seeing revival again. As I said, we're going to try in the next few months an old-fashioned tent meeting, which will run for a whole week, every night. And that's what we used to do years ago. I'd love to wonder if that would still work. I don't know whether it will. I often think of my involvement on the council as a fairly minor member of it. I mean, I have my say, the same as everybody else, but I would still say fairly minor member. And now and again I think, when will I pull out? You know, when will I resign? And I'm sure there'll come a day, maybe not that far away, when I will. But I do, at times I say to Helen, you know, I'd like to just pull out from being a pastor, you know. But then other times I think, well, the moment you lose the title, whatever it is, the ministry, well, then you sort of lose a little bit of recognition, and therefore if you want to do something, well, you're just Joe Bloggs from nowhere in particular, you know. So at the moment, I'm sort of living with it, you know. I'm most possibly a pastor in name only in a lot of areas, compared with people like Pastor Bob and that are running an assembly. I'm not doing that. So, but that's the status quo at the moment. And like we just went to New Zealand and I cruised through all the assemblies there. I love doing that. I used to do it when I was in New Zealand. And I love cruising up the east coast here and going through all the assemblies, you know. If I can do anything to tie the work together, and there are differences, you know, we often talk about east and west and whatever. And I, for one, would like to break that down as much as I can. You know, like Pastor Brad Smith in Brisbane, he's very much a lateral thinker, and he goes off at tangents a little bit, in our opinion, sometimes. But recently, you know, I've tried to get on his wavelength, and he has some, you know, brilliant points of view on that. And I just sort of think, you know, if we can only respect each other. I've said that earlier on. You know, we know in a marriage that love is number one, but respect is only that far behind in a marriage. I'll tell you all about that one day, Paul, you know. But respect is so important. And in our fellowship, respect is vital, and we lose respect a bit sometimes. But if we get together and keep communicating, we just solve so many problems, you know.
Pastor Jock, a new person, they've only been a member of our church for a very short time. What kind of church are they coming into? What is their experience going to be? And obviously, as you've already described, that our churches vary in culture and practice all over the world. But when they come into a revival fellowship meeting, wherever that happens to be, what are they coming into?
I dare say, number one, I'd really love to think that they were coming into some good Bible, clear teaching, and not just sort of a frothy, good feeling. I'd love them to really get what we call catch the vision and start to devour the Word of God. The other thing I'd always love them to have, and unfortunately we can't always provide it, is an assembly that is very secure. And, there's no infighting and that, because that is the trouble if you bring a new person in and they get caught up. So that's why unity is so important, not only internationally in Australia, but the local assembly. It is vital. But now and again, you can't stop that. It goes through a bit of a time. But the sooner we always get back together and pull together, you want to protect the new people. You don't want them involved in, we're talking about splits and things like that. You'd love to think they could be in the Lord for 6 months before they ever hear the word, And the other thing that I really hope, and it is a unique thing about our fellowship, is the closeness. There's a lot of big groups out there. You go along to that local church and it's great, but if you go to another city, there's no connection. It might even be the same group. But in our fellowship, with our camps and our conventions, there's friends everywhere. And a lot of our people have always said, you go to another assembly and you're immediately at home. That's what I'd like to have our new people come into. And they say it, and that is, I want to be part of a family. Well, they might not say it, but that's what they relate. I feel I'm part of a family. And the care of the brethren, not only the oversight, but brothers and sisters, that is a vital part. And something our fellowship is talking a lot more about, and I really hope it goes on talking about it, is that we literally want to smother them in love. We want to smother them in attention, and we don't want them to be just 1 hour on Sunday Christians. We want them to make it their life. And I think in the fellowship, and I have had people that have left our fellowship comment on that they miss the closeness. They go somewhere else, it might be grand and a big show and that, but when it comes to Christmas time, hey, there is no camp. And the interaction often in big groups, it's very broadly speaking, is often not there. But in the revival movement, revival fellowship, there is that wonderful closeness. And I think that if I could promote anything in our fellowship, I'd really love to keep that. Yes, there are differences, and there'll always be little differences, but overall I would hope that we're fairly much the same doctrinally. So that now people often say that, I went here, I went over to Europe, I went to America, I went to New Zealand, I travelled throughout Australia, and everywhere I went, it was just the same. And the moment I walked in the door, it was just like I'd been there before. Now, I'd hate for us to ever lose that. And that is a little uniqueness that we have, however big we get.
Pastor Jock, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
I've enjoyed it.
So have I.
He's gone to sleep.